Picture this, a continent bursting with resources, vibrant cultures, and endless potential. Now imagine that same continent being systematically stripped of its wealth, its people oppressed, and its future compromised. Welcome to Africa, folks, the cradle of humanity that's been treated like humanity's doormat for centuries. But here's the kicker. This isn't ancient history. Oh no, this exploitation is happening right now, as we speak. While you're sipping your fair trade coffee, there's a whole continent being royally screwed over. And who's behind this grand larceny on a continental scale? You guessed it, our good friends in the West and Europe. Now I know what you're thinking. But John, surely things have changed. We're in the 21st century. Well, buckle up, Buttercup, because we're about to take a wild ride through the wonderland of modern-day exploitation. Africa isn't taking this lying down. They're fighting back, and boy is it a sight to behold. So stick around as we dive into this roller coaster of injustice, resilience, and hope. Let's hop into our time machine and travel back to the 15th century. Picture this, European sailors, armed with questionable hygiene and unquestionable audacity, stumbling upon the African continent. Their reaction? Ooh, shiny, let's take it all. And thus began a centuries-long shopping spree that would make even the most dedicated Black Friday enthusiast blush. First on the menu was the slave trade. Because nothing says civilized quite like kidnapping millions of people and forcing them to work in conditions that would make an Amazon warehouse look like a spa retreat. This charming practice not only devastated African societies, but also fueled the economic growth of Europe and the Americas. Fast forward to the 19th century and we hit the jackpot of exploitation colonialism. European powers, drunk on Industrial Revolution juice, decided to carve up Africa like a Thanksgiving turkey. The Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885 was essentially a real estate party where Africa was the property, and Africans weren't invited. Under colonial rule, Africa became a giant supermarket for European powers. The colonial powers implemented systems of governance, education, and economics that were designed to benefit the colonizers, not the colonized. Now let's talk about money, honey, because when it comes to Africa, the West has been playing a game of economic Jenga, carefully extracting wealth while trying not to topple the whole structure. First up, we have the classic move resource extraction. Africa is like nature's treasure chest, bursting with oil, diamonds, gold, and other goodies that make corporations drool. But here's the catch. Most of the profits from these resources flow out of Africa faster than you can say neo-colonialism. Then there's the debt trap. Western financial institutions have been all too happy to lend money to African countries. These loans often come with more strings attached than a puppet show. High interest rates, structural adjustment programs, and conditions that benefit Western economies more than African ones. Let's not forget about unfair trade practices. The global economic system is about as balanced as a one-legged elephant on a tightrope. Now let's dive into the murky waters of political manipulation where the lines between friend and foe blur. Because nothing says democracy quite like meddling in other countries' affairs, right? It's a tale as old as time. The West has turned political interference in Africa into an art form, a dark and twisted art form. First on our hit parade of political shenanigans is the good old support the dictator strategy, a classic move in the playbook. Western powers have a long history of propping up authoritarian regimes in Africa, as long as these regimes play ball and keep the resources flowing. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement, at least for the powers that be. Then we have the classic regime change move, a favorite among the power players. Don't like a government that's not cooperating with your economic interests? No problem. Just sprinkle a little democracy here, fund some opposition groups there, and voila, you've got yourself a brand new West-friendly government. It's almost like magic. Let's not forget about the divide and conquer tactic, a strategy as old as empire itself. Western powers have often exploited and exacerbated ethnic and religious divisions in African countries to maintain control. It's a divide and rule strategy that keeps the pot boiling. And then there's the more subtle form of political manipulation, conditional aid, the velvet glove over the iron fist. Western countries and institutions often attach political strings to their aid packages, ensuring that the recipient countries dance to their tune. We'll help you build schools, but only if you privatize your water supply. These conditions often undermine African countries' sovereignty and ability to make decisions in their own best interests, creating a cycle of dependency. It's democracy with an asterisk, freedom with fine print, and the true cost is often hidden in the details. Social devastation, the human cost. Alright folks, brace yourselves. We're diving deep into the heart-wrenching reality of the human cost of exploitation. We're about to dive into the human cost of all this exploitation, and let me tell you, it's about as pretty as a dumpster fire at a landfill. The situation is dire and demands our attention. The social impact of Western exploitation on Africa is like a tsunami of awfulness that just keeps on giving. Let's start with education. It's a fundamental right, yet it's being compromised. Many African countries are struggling with underfunded and overcrowded schools. The lack of resources is staggering, and the future of countless children is at stake. Why? Because resources that could go into education are instead flowing out of the continent faster than you can say brain drain. This exodus of talent is crippling the continent's potential. And speaking of brain drain, many of Africa's brightest minds end up leaving for better opportunities abroad. Healthcare? Oh boy, that's another can of worms. Many African countries are grappling with inadequate healthcare systems, partly thanks to years of structural adjustment programs imposed by Western financial institutions. These policies have left a lasting scar. These programs often required cuts to public spending, including healthcare. The consequences have been devastating, leaving millions without access to basic medical care. The result? A continent struggling with preventable diseases and high mortality rates. It's a tragic irony that in a world of medical advancements, so many lives are lost needlessly. And let's not forget about the environmental impact. The exploitation doesn't stop at human lives. It extends to the very land itself. Western corporations have treated parts of Africa like their personal trash can, dumping waste and polluting with abandon. The environmental degradation is appalling and affects livelihoods. The struggle to reclaim and celebrate African cultural identity in the face of Western domination is real and ongoing. It's a fight for dignity, heritage, and the right to self-determination. Resource curse, Africa's blessing and curse. Alright, let's talk about the ultimate cosmic joke played on Africa, the resource curse. Africa is blessed, or cursed, depending on how you look at it, with an abundance of natural resources. We're talking oil, diamonds, gold, cobalt, you name it. Now you'd think all these riches would make African countries wealthier than Scrooge McDuck, doing the backstroke in his money bin. But here's the punchline. Many resource-rich African countries are among the poorest in the world. This paradox is what economists call the resource curse or the paradox of plenty. So, how does this curse work? Well, it's a bit like trying to juggle while riding a unicycle on a tightrope over a pit of hungry crocodiles. First, the discovery of valuable resources often leads to conflict. Different groups fight for control, turning what should be a blessing into a bloodbath. Then there's the economic side of things. Countries rich in resources often neglect other sectors of their economy, putting all their eggs in the resource basket. Africa fights back economic initiatives. But wait, just when you thought this story was darker than a black hole wearing sunglasses, here comes the plot twist. Africa isn't taking this exploitation lying down. In fact, they're standing tall and making bold moves. Oh no, they're fighting back with the economic equivalent of nunchucks, and it's a sight to behold. It's like watching a masterclass in economic resilience. First up, we've got the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA. This bad boy is set to create the world's largest free trade area since the formation of the World Trade Organization. Imagine the possibilities. The goal? To boost intra-African trade, reduce dependency on external partners, and create a single market with free movement of goods and services. It's a game changer. Next on the menu of economic fightback is resource nationalism. African countries are increasingly saying, hey, these are our resources and we're going to use them for our benefit, thank you very much. It's about time. Countries are renegotiating contracts with multinational corporations, imposing higher taxes and royalties, and even nationalizing some industries. It's a bold move, but a necessary one. Then there's the push for value addition. Instead of just exporting raw materials, African countries are working to process and add value to their resources before export. This strategy is a win-win. This move creates jobs, increases export earnings, and helps build local industries. It's a comprehensive approach to economic empowerment. Political awakening, a new era of leadership. Now let's turn our attention to the political arena where Africa is serving up some spicy meatballs of change. First on our tour of political transformation is the rise of Pan-Africanism. This isn't your grandfather's Pan-Africanism, it's Pan-Africanism 2.0, turbocharged and ready to rumble. African leaders are increasingly looking beyond their borders, recognizing that unity is strength. The African Union, despite its challenges, is becoming a more influential player on the global stage. Next up, we've got a new breed of African leaders who are saying thanks, but no thanks to Western puppeteering. These leaders are prioritizing African interests and aren't afraid to stand up to Western powers. It's like watching the geopolitical equivalent of a teenager asserting independence from overbearing parents. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Africa's political awakening, make sure to like and subscribe to Express Econ Geofinance Insights. And don't forget to leave a comment below with your thoughts.